Hello, everyone. Got a few dirty jokes for you today.
So, a young guy is out on the town with his mates when he spots the girl of his dreams across the dance floor. After admiring her from a distance, he finally works up the courage to approach her. To his surprise, things go even better than expected. She agrees to go on a date with him the following Saturday. Saturday night rolls around, and the guy shows up at her house with flowers and candy in hand. But when she opens the door, she's standing there in nothing but a towel. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," she says. "I'm running a little late. Come in. I'll introduce you to my parents. They'll keep you company while I finish getting ready. Just a heads up, though they're both deaf mutes." So, the guy follows her inside, and she introduces him to her parents before disappearing to finish getting dressed. Now, it's already a bit awkward. The dad is sitting there, silently watching golf, and the mom is knitting, completely focused on her work. The room is quiet, really quiet. Then, about 10 minutes in, the mom suddenly jumps up from her chair, lifts up her skirt, pulls down her panties, and pours a glass of water over her fanny. Before the guy can even process that, the dad leaps up, bends the mom over the couch, and well, let's just say, gets busy with her right there. Afterward, he calmly sits back down and balances a matchstick in front of his eye, like nothing even happened. The room returns to complete silence, and the guy is left in absolute shock, unable to believe what he's just seen. 10 minutes later, the daughter comes back, fully dressed and ready for the date. But the guy, he's rattled. The whole evening is a mess because he's totally distracted by what happened with her parents. At the end of the night, she asks, "What's wrong? Did I do something to upset you?" No, it's not you," he replies. "It's just, the strangest thing happened while I was waiting for you. First, your mom jumps up, pulls down her panties, and dumps water all over her fanny. Then, your dad jumps up, bends her over the couch, and had his way with her. And after all that, he just sits back down and balances a matchstick by his eye." The girl looks at him and says, "Oh, that's what's bothering you?" Now, the guy is stunned by how casual she's being. She explains that's just how they communicate. Mom was asking, "Are you going to get this guy a drink?" And Dad was like, "Nah, screw him. I'm watching the match." So, an African ambassador was visiting Russia and was hosted by his Russian counterpart. For 3 days, the African ambassador was wined, dined, and treated to the finest hospitality Russia had to offer. On the final day of the visit, the Russian ambassador said, "Now that your stay is coming to an end, it's time for you to experience our traditional game, Russian roulette. One of the 6 chambers in this gun is loaded. You spin the cylinder, point the gun at your head, and pull the trigger." The African ambassador was slightly taken aback, but being a proud man from a warrior culture, he couldn't show fear. So, both men took their guns, spun the cylinders, and pulled the triggers. Both chambers were empty. They breathed a sigh of relief. The African ambassador, impressed by the daring nature of the game, thought long and hard about how he could reciprocate when the Russian visited his country the next year. Fast forward to the following year. The Russian ambassador arrived in Africa and, as before, was treated to the finest hospitality. On the final day, the African ambassador said, "Now, it's time for you to experience our traditional game, African roulette." He led the Russian into a private room where 6 stunning, naked women were waiting. "These women," said the African ambassador, "are the most beautiful from one of our tribes. One of them will give you oral pleasure." The Russian ambassador was intrigued but a bit puzzled. "Well, This sounds nice, but where's the roulette part? Where's the danger? With a big grin, African ambassador replied, "One of them's a cannibal." So a minister dies and finds himself waiting in line at the pearly gates. Ahead of him is a guy dressed in sunglasses, a loud shirt, a leather jacket, and jeans. St. Peter looks at the guy and asks, "Who are you, so I can determine whether or not to admit you to the kingdom of heaven?" The guy replies, "I'm Joe Cohen, taxi driver from New York City." St. Peter checks his list, smiles, and says, "Take this silken robe and golden staff and enter the kingdom." The taxi driver goes into heaven with his robe and staff. Next, it's the minister's turn. He stands up straight and proudly announces, "I'm Joseph Snow, pastor of St. Mary's for the last 43 years. St. Peter reviews his list and responds, "Take this cotton robe and wooden staff and enter the kingdom." The minister is taken aback. Wait a minute. That man was a taxi driver, and he gets a silken robe and a golden staff. How is that fair? St. Peter smiles and says, "Up here, we base things on results. While you preached, people slept. While he drove, people prayed." So 2 doctors set up a practice in a small town. One was a psychiatrist, the other a proctologist. They put up a sign that read, "Dr. Smith and Dr. Jones, Psychiatry and Proctology." Now, the town council wasn't exactly thrilled with that. So, the doctors figured, all right, let's change it up. And they did. They came back with hysterias and posteriors. Nope, still didn't fly. So, trying to be clever, they switched it to schizoids and hemorrhoids. Big shock. That one didn't pass either. At this point, they're getting desperate, so they try catatonics and colonics. Can you believe it? Rejected again. But they're committed. So next up, they go for manic depressives and anal retentives. But the council still says no. Now, you'd think they'd throw in the towel. But no, these doctors have grit. They keep at it. Here's what they go through next. Minds and behinds. Analysis and anal cysts. Nuts and butts. Freaks and cheeks. Loons and moons. And finally, in a last-ditch effort, lost souls and assholes. Nope, nothing worked. By now, they're completely out of ideas. But at the very end, just when they're about to give up, they come up with Dr. Smith and Dr. Jones, odds and ends. And wouldn't you know it got approved? So an elderly couple who've been married forever are sitting together on their porch one evening, rocking back and forth, enjoying the quiet night. Out of nowhere, the old woman reaches over and whacks her husband, sending him flying off the porch and into the bushes. He struggles to his feet, crawls back up onto the porch, and asks, "What was that for?" She looks at him and says, "For having a little pecker." He sits there for a moment, thinking, then suddenly reaches over and smacks her, sending her tumbling off the other side of the porch and into the bushes. She crawls back up, dusts herself off, and demands, "And what was that for?" He looks at her and replies, "For knowing there was more than one size." So a farmer hops into his ute and drives over to a neighboring farm. He knocks on the farmhouse door, and a young boy, about 9, answers. "Is your dad home?" The farmer asks. "Sorry, mate, he's not," the boy replies. "He went into town." "Well, Is your mum here? No, sir. She went into town with Dad. A farmer shifts awkwardly. How about your brother, Greg? Is he here? The boy shakes his head. He went with Mum and Dad. The farmer stands there for a moment, shuffling his feet, unsure what to do next. The boy, noticing the farmer's discomfort, offers, anything I can do for you? I know where all the tools are if you need to borrow one, or I can take a message for Dad. The farmer, still hesitant, replies, well, I really needed to talk to your dad. It's about your brother Greg getting my daughter pregnant. The boy pauses, thinking it over. You'll probably have to talk to Dad about that, he says thoughtfully. But if it helps, I know Dad charges $200 for the bull and $150 for the pig. I'm just not sure what he gets for Greg. So the Pope and Nancy Pelosi are standing together on a stage in front of a massive crowd. The Pope leans over to Pelosi and says, you know, with just one simple wave of my hand, I can make every single person here go wild with joy. This joy won't be fleeting like it is with your followers. No, it'll go deep into their hearts, and they'll remember this moment forever. Pelosi, a bit skeptical, replies, I seriously doubt that. With just one wave of your hand, prove it. So the Pope slapped her. So 8-year-old Nina proudly brought her report card home from school. Her grades were good, but her teacher had added a note at the bottom. Nina is a smart little girl, but she has one fault. She talks too much in class. I have an idea I'm going to try that I think might break her of the habit. Nina's dad read the note, signed the report card, and added his own message on the back. Please let me know if your idea works on Nina, because I'd love to try it out on her mother. So a beautiful, voluptuous woman goes to the gynecologist for a checkup. The doctor takes one look at her, and all his professionalism flies out the window. He nervously asks her to undress. After she disrobes, the doctor starts stroking her thigh. Do you know what I'm doing? He asks. Yes, she replies. You're checking for any skin abrasions or abnormalities. That's right, says the doctor. Feeling more confident, he moves on and begins fondling her breasts. And now, do you know what I'm doing? He asks. You're checking for lumps or signs of breast cancer. Correct, says the doctor. Emboldened, he decides to go all in. He mounts her and starts having his way with her. And now, do you know what I'm doing? He asks with a grin. Yes, she says calmly. You're getting herpes, which is what I came in for. So a couple, notorious for their overspending, always dreamed of taking a vacation to Hawaii, but could never save enough money. One day, they came up with a plan. Every time they made love, they'd put a $20 bill into a piggy bank. They bought the piggy bank and followed through with their plan for a year. After a while, they decided they had saved enough for their dream vacation and broke open the piggy bank. The husband looked at the money and said, Isn't it strange? Every time we had sex, I put $20 in here, but I see lots of $50 bills and even a few $100 bills. The wife replied with a grin, Well, not everyone is as stingy as you. So, a woman asks her husband, If I die, would you remarry? The husband replies, I suppose I would, dear. But it wouldn't be the same without you. The woman is touched and says, That's sweet. I don't think you should be alone. She continues her line of questioning. Would you stay in this house? He thinks for a moment and says, There are so many memories of our wonderful life here, but it would be more economical to stay. The woman nods and asks, would you share the same bed with her? He hesitates and says, it would be hard, but I suppose I'd manage if it made sense financially. The woman accepts this, but asks, would you play golf with her like we used to? Playing golf would help me remember the good times we had. He replies. Really? The woman says, beginning to feel a bit like she's easy to replace. Well, would she use my golf clubs? The husband replies decisively, of course not. She's left-handed. So two alligators are sitting around chatting, and the smaller one says to the bigger one, I don't understand how you're so much bigger than me. We're the same age, and we're the same size when we were kids. What's your secret? The bigger alligator replies, well, what have you been eating? Politicians, just like you, says the smaller gator. Really? Where do you catch them? Down by the other side of the swamp, near the parking lot by the Capitol. Same here. How do you catch them? I crawl under one of their Lexus cars and wait for them to unlock the door. Then I jump out, grab them by the leg, shake the stuffing out of them, and eat them. The big alligator nods and says, I think I see your problem. You're not getting any real nourishment. Why's that? Asks the small gator. Well, the big alligator explains, by the time you finish shaking the stuffing out of a politician, there's nothing left but an asshole in a briefcase. So a blonde comes home early from shopping and hears strange noises coming from the bedroom. She rushes upstairs to find her husband lying naked on the bed, sweating and panting. What's going on? She asks, concerned. I think I'm having a heart attack, he gasps. The blonde rushes downstairs to grab the phone. Just as she's dialing, her 4-year-old son runs up to her and says, Mommy, Mommy, Auntie Shirley is hiding in your wardrobe, and she's not wearing any clothes. The blonde slams the phone down, storms back upstairs, and bursts into the bedroom, ignoring her husband. She rips open the wardrobe door and finds her sister, completely naked and cowering. How could you? The blonde screams. My husband is having a heart attack, and you're up here, running around naked playing hide and seek with the kids. So, a young woman was preparing for her wedding and asked her mother to buy a nice, long black negligee, making sure it was carefully packed in her suitcase to avoid wrinkles. However, her mother forgot until the last minute. In a hurry, she could only find a short pink nightie, which she bought and tossed into the suitcase. After the wedding, the bride and groom arrive at their hotel room. The groom, feeling a bit self-conscious, asks his new bride to change in the bathroom and promises not to peek while he gets ready for bed. As she opens her suitcase in the bathroom, the bride sees the short pink nightie and exclaims, "Oh no!" It's short, pink, and wrinkled. From the other room, the groom shouts, "I told you not to peek." So, Canadian salesman checks into a futuristic hotel in Tokyo, Japan. Realizing he needs a haircut before the next day's meeting, he calls the front desk to ask if there's a barber on the premises. "I'm afraid not, sir," the desk clerk replies apologetically. "But down the hall from your room, there's a vending machine that should meet your needs." Skeptical but intrigued, the salesman finds the machine, inserts $15, and sticks his head into the opening. The machine starts to buzz and whirl. 15 seconds later, the salesman pulls his head out and is amazed to see the best haircut of his life. 2 feet away, there's another machine with a sign that reads, "Manicures, $20." The salesman thinks, why not? He pays the money, inserts his hands into the slot, and the machine buzzes and whirls. 15 seconds later, his hands are perfectly manicured. The next machine has a sign that says, "This machine provides a service men need when away from their wives. 50 cents. The salesman looks around, puts 50 cents into the machine, unzips his fly, and, with some anticipation, sticks his manhood into the opening. The machine starts buzzing, and the salesman lets out a shriek of agony, nearly passing out. 15 seconds later, it stops. With trembling hands, the salesman withdraws his tender unit, which now has a button sewn neatly on the end. So a husband and wife were driving down a country lane on their way to visit some friends when they hit a large muddy hole and got their car stuck. After struggling to get the car out on their own, they spotted a young farmer driving some oxen. The farmer stopped to help and offered to pull the car out for $50. The husband agreed, and in no time, the car was free. As the farmer was finishing up, he said, "You're the 10th car I've helped out of the mud today." The husband, surprised, looked around at the fields and asked, "When do you find time to plow your land? Do you work at night?" "No," the farmer replied seriously. "At night is when I put the water in the hole."
Yeah.